Yes, so welcome to this afternoon where the topic is AI-enabled product owner. And we have a lot of things to share with you. And the reason we have these meetings is because we want to inspire you in terms of how you can apply AI, not just on the individual level, because many of us, we are using AI just individually, but we also want to see it in a cross-functional team context. So how can AI be used in a cross-functional team? That being said, we still have a focus today on a specific role in the team, and that is the product owner, which in my experience is a very important role for the team. And what we have for you this afternoon is two parts where we first dive into some use cases and discuss where can you use AI as a product owner. And you also try a little prompting exercise with brainstorming on ideas. And we'll dive into how you can use AI to write acceptance criteria and test cases. And we use a tool called Trello to do that. And we'll dive into the topic of UX and user stories. In my experience, many teams are working with user stories, but many teams are also working with UX and tools that can draw wireframes and visual user interfaces. And we'll discuss some different ways of using that and see some pros and cons in different strategies for dealing with these two things. And I'll also give a short demo of a CustomGPT with a Trello tool that gives it a new opportunity to do something in other tools than just ChatGPT. If you stay for the end, I'll share a short AI hack with you to get some user feedback, but not from real users, but just from an AI user. So we have a cross-functional team here. What is interesting about a cross-functional team is that they collaborate. They have roles and responsibilities, and they also work with improvements. If we have a normal agile cross-functional team, we expect them to evolve over time and improve the way they work. So what happens when we AI enable this team, where these team members suddenly begin using AI in the context of solving tasks more efficiently and with higher quality and so forth? You could say that we could focus on the individual roles in the team, but what we care more about is that AI is also a team effort. Although it's not always easy to put AI into a team where the whole team is part of that. And that is some of the discussions that we will have during today, the session here, where Heidi Kristensen and I, Jesper, is going to show you a little bit of inspiration in terms of using AI as a product owner. It's a little bit of technical things about how you can use AI assistants these days. We can give them a specific role. You can give it a role of an architect, a tester, or a UXer. And I'll also show an example of a custom AI that has tools. In the beginning of AI, it was a little bit difficult to get AI to do anything else than just chatting and getting text out of it. But these days, we can give it specific tools so they can do more than just answering our questions. And I'll show you an example a little bit later about that. Another thing that is important when we work with AI is what context we give to these AI assistants. And also share some examples of what to consider when giving tasks to AI and what context is relevant when you're in a product owner environment. Also consider sometimes mixing agents, mixing AI assistants. So you might have some AI assistants that are small and cheap, specialized in a specific thing. It could be creating pictures, for example, and also more general AI assistants. Sometimes we have to consider collaboration between not just one agent, but several agents. And we'll also show a small example of that.
Before we move on, just maybe curious just to hear from one or two, something you talked about, some experiences. So
I'm a Scrum Master, so I had a product owner that wanted to refine his epics going into quarterly planning or PI planning. And so to try and make it easier for him, I had a call where we recorded it, the whole thing. He walked me through every epic. what's the OKRs, what's all the stuff we want to know, right? And then I got a transcription and fed that to Copilot. And then I could take that. Copilot could then describe and refine our epic somewhat. I could give it back to him. He could negotiate a bit. We could write a bit more. But it felt like maybe the process was shortcutted a little bit, and it went faster and easier this way. So that was one story. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Then we have Esker as well.
Yes, we started using a product called Cursor, where we feed that with some MCP servers so it can connect to our different tools, so it can read log data and access our code base and read user stories, and then come up with a suggestion for a solution to those. So in a lot of cases, it will read the error log that is mentioned in the product backlog item and read the code base and see how it goes and actually run the code and find a solution. And it works to some extent. It can suggest a code change, and it can be code reviewed by a real developer and checked in as a solution to it. So that's been happening in some cases, and we have high hopes of it doing more and more over time.
Thanks.
So yeah, we actually also discussed about an agent that does a lot of work, and I also said that I developed an app where we give a story or an epic as an input along with a document which describes our prioritization, and the app actually comes up with a prioritization category, whether it's a must-have, should have, would have, or an would have.
And useful?
Yeah, I've tested it with some historical data also. So it has a clarity. I mean, it matches with at least 85% of our previous data.
Very good. Thank you. And thanks for sharing and also participating out in the rooms. So let's move on a little bit, because I just want to introduce 4 principles that Jesper and I are working with and have been all the time actually updating them a little bit as things evolve, but more or less they've been like this all the time. We thought this is changing so fast and evolving that we need some principles to help us steer what it is we want to keep having in focus when we are talking about this. The 4 principles you see here is what we lean towards, and I'm just going to give you just a little bit about what it is. The first one is exactly this, evolving, because it does. So evolve with AI. So keep using it but be critical. So use it where it creates value and apply it thoughtfully where it enhances outcomes. So where we can gain more from it. And then stay curious and keep adapting the practices that you already have with AI, because one thing is to start to use AI, but then also know that it keeps changing and evolving. So continuously being curious and staying on top of that. So a very, I'm sure you've all experienced, new approach into something new in our hands, but something in our hands that keeps changing. So evolving together with AI is our first principle. And the second one is human in the loop. So to make sure no matter what we do, we think in how are we humans in the loop. So AI for sure works best with human help, setting it up and knowing what to do. And for sure also using our judgment and expertise. Even though it gets better and better, we should still use our judgment and expertise and still remember that AI is built to make you happy, higher than being always accurate. And the tricky part is probably now that it's getting much, much better, we see less of obvious hallucinations or wrong context, but it's still there. It's just sometimes hidden in, and it can be very persuasive. So the importance of being human in the loop, and perhaps doing that in a good way, can also give us a chance to really put being human into play even more. If we can get AI to do some of the examples you just shared, then maybe we can do the human part more on a daily basis as well. So that's for our second principle. The third one is to treat AI as a collaborative partner. So it's not just a tool, but it's more to think of AI, I'm sure you've experienced as well, as kind of a person. So either as a sparring partner, a co-worker, sometimes a teacher or a coach. And then to use it in a way to broaden perspectives, but not to replace human connection. So the key here is to co-create responsibly together with AI. And responsibly is also our fourth principle. So be responsible, make sure to prioritize fairness, sustainability, and accountability, and make it explainable what you use AI for and open for reflection. And then build trust through responsible use. All of this, you can say, also goes very nicely hand in hand with the AI Act from the EU that was officially started last year and is rolled out over the next years now, where we also see the requirements. You can say it's compliance, or you can say it's like good design thinking, how we use AI, because the requirements are very much around making it transparent and fair in what we do, and then remembering that accountability always falls back on us as the users, the humans of AI, using AI. So we cannot just say it was AI who gave the wrong answer. The responsibility and accountability is back on us when we're looking into the AI Act. So that covers the responsibility part as well. So 4 principles that we continuously check in on, and maybe can inspire some of you as well in your work moving forward with this. But here's something around use cases for product ownership and AI.
So we can use AI as a product owner, that's for sure. And I've made a small list also to remind ourselves, what does the product owner normally do? We have to remember that the purpose of a product owner is to maximize the value of the team. And that's not an easy task in my experience. It's always difficult to figure out what is the most valuable part a team can deliver in the next 2 weeks, for example. And doing that, there's a lot of different activities and responsibilities we have as a product owner. If you want to create a vision, well, like we just heard with some examples of gathering information and summarizing things and also presenting, for example, yes, that's a really obvious way of using AI to create something that is communicating intent and goals. One thing I would not use AI for is to ultimately decide on the value that we deliver. Again, human in the loop, in my kind of gut feeling, is really important when we have to figure out what really creates value of what we decide to deliver. So we can get a lot of input, of course, but we're the ones who decide what to do or what not to do. Road mapping. I haven't tried it yet, but road mapping is about planning into the future. I guess you could use AI for doing that, and also forecasting. Very similar to road mapping, where we kind of look into the future. How much can we deliver in the upcoming months, for example? I've tried some small experiments, but I wouldn't say I've tried it with real teams yet. But I guess teams today have the data to make some forecastings into the future. And I've talked with some teams about estimation. So can AI estimate what can we achieve in this team? Some teams would say, no, of course it cannot, because what do AI know about how much we can deliver and what we need in order to deliver? But perhaps try to use AI also in areas where you not immediately think it can help, but sometimes you get a new experience about perhaps it could actually help with things that you normally do as a team. Brainstorming on ideas is an obvious use case for AI, because when you use it, an AI has a pretty broad perspective on things, or you can actually create a broader perspective when you give it an idea and you want to dive a little bit more into what is a good solution for this. And this is where we have this first small prompting exercise and use a prompt to find solutions to a specific problem. So it's a prompt I call standard innovative prompt pattern. I'll show you the prompt in just a few seconds. What it has as input is a problem or a need. And in the prompt, you have a problem or need already, but we would advise you to see if you can fill in your own problem and need from your own context, because then you get a little bit more interesting output from this prompt. And what you get of output is a problem deep dive. So it's not just kind of thinking about what is the obvious solution for this. It's also trying to dive a little more behind what is the actual problem here. And then it comes with 2 solutions, one standard solution and one innovative solution. And that can be a good way to ask AI to do something for you, so you get a broader perspective on the output. And it looks like this, or parts of it at least. So I won't go through the whole prompt here, but the context setting here is where you can put in your own context. So it already has a context, but we advise you just to delete that and then fill in your own context, because that will be much more interesting for you in this exercise. Hopefully you can see that the innovative solution was something that you really didn't think was a solution in the first place. You can also ask normal people to think out of the box, and that's the same for AI assistants. So we saw that it can be used for brainstorming idea. Very similar to that, we can also explore user needs with AI. We don't have examples of that today, but we also have an AI-enabled product owner course where we in one day dive into some of these areas in more details and look at prompts and how you can work with many of these responsibilities and AI. We're just scratching the surface a little bit today here because we only have 1.5 hours. When we come to breakdown and splitting things in smaller things, that can also be very beneficial. And I'll also show an example of that a little bit later. Backlog refinement, writing features and user stories and acceptance criteria is really an obvious way of using AI. And we'll show you an example with that. But before we do that, we have also thought about some aspects to consider when AI enabling a team, not just the individual persons in the team. And what are those 4 aspects, Heidi?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. The first one is around the tools. So tool shifts, like some of you probably have experienced already, what to do when changing tools so you're not just using ones. So some considerations about how to have some seamless handover from the different tools is worth having some thoughts about. And then having the human reviews of the AI output. Also what I mentioned before with the AI Act from the EU. Are they clear on their role as a reviewer? What are their role and their tasks? Does the review lead to any improvements in the prompting? So something to consider, some aspects around that as well. Then the context is key here. So how do you manage the context? Is it stored somewhere? Can you document where it is? Are you aware of the data that your AI is generating the answers based on? And how is it refreshed over time as work evolves? Some versioning around that as well is an aspect to consider. And then the 4th one is around the whole prompt life cycle. So from creation to evaluation and to maintaining when we improve it over time. So are prompts treated as just something we do once, or is it something that we actually has an asset that we are evolving? If it is, the questions are who then maintains them? Are they owned like code or documents, or where are they? So very much when it becomes part of something we do in a team, we want to start asking ourselves these questions. And I know, Jesper, you will get back to these later just to map it all out in what you're going to present now.
Yes, because I'll give you short examples of how you can use AI to give input for acceptance criteria and test cases. We could consider, if we're a team and not just an individual person, what tools are best for the team to work in. I'll give you an example. It's not necessarily the perfect way of doing it for acceptance criteria and test cases. And a little bit later, we'll also look at UX, which is slightly more difficult to figure out what is a good tool to work with UX. But let's take the more easy one first. I'm working with a small team these days where we use Trello as a Kanban board where we have our stories. We also use Figma to draw some wireframes and some user interfaces. We also want to use AI and experiment with that. And we have used Zapier to integrate with ChatGPT so we can work in Trello as a tool, but still use AI, you can say, behind the scenes by integrating it with the tool called Zapier. Let me show you how that can work. This is a small board in Trello where we have our backlog. We are building a small event app for weddings and birthdays and something like that, where you can create, for example, a new event with some basic information. So if I'm a host, I want to create an event with name, date, time, and place, so I can start sending invitations to the participants. So at this point in time, we only have this small storyline in our user story. But if I put it over here in AI input for clarifications, Zapier would discover that and read the story and then help me with some input for acceptance criteria and perhaps also other things I need to consider when implementing this user story. So Trello, of course, is an online tool. So it's in the cloud. And if you have a tool like that, it's fairly easy to tie things together and achieve some input from AI in the tool. So you can see it moved without me doing anything. And if I open it, it now has some acceptance criteria down here. So it says that I should input event name and date and time, could be an event description and cover image or video. It actually thought about that already. I can show you that it also has some context in a few seconds. In here, I could read what the input is from AI. It also has some clarifications. Should there be a limit of number of guests that could be invited? Well, perhaps not in the beginning, but I could get some good inputs also about what to consider when creating a new event here. Down here, I also ask it to come with some security concerns. I'm really not good at security, but if I can get AI to give input, that can then help me with considering security issues here. Using Trello here, of course, it's easy then to edit the input here because it could be that the host has the option to further customize guest list details. Well, that's not really part of this story, so I can delete that. Otherwise, it sounds reasonable enough. Perhaps the event is immediately available in the host upcoming event list after creation. Well, that's also part of the story, I would assume. This is a team tool where we work with these stories. Next step could be that I want some input for test cases. So now I'm moving the card here in the next column. So I also want some input for test cases. And while we wait for that, I can show you another board where the prompts are stored. So the prompts it is using for my output. So the first prompt here is what we just saw with the acceptance criteria. So it's a small prompt. It doesn't fill a lot here. I say one thing in this prompt is that limited to 6 acceptance criteria, because I experienced that sometimes it's come with 12 acceptance criteria. That's too much typically, because then it's figuring out a lot of things that is not really part of this story. And this is also where you can see that I ask it to make a small review from a security architect and also add some clarifications. So this is a way of storing a prompt one place, and then if I want to change the prompt for the next run, I could just do it in here. And then next time the AI would use this updated prompt, and that is a good way of sharing prompts in the team. Let's see over here if it is done with the test cases. I think it is. Down here, we now have some test cases. And it's using a specific format for these test cases. As you can see, if you know what is called behavior-driven development, we are writing scenarios in a format like given, when, and then. This I could actually take and copy into my test tool if I had a tool like that. Of course, that would be a tool shift. Sometimes we have to consider if this is a good place to create these test cases. But in here, I could actually edit it right away, or I could also paste it in another editor and then edit it in that. One thing I asked it to do here, and we can see that in the prompt for input for test cases, is that I wrote a little bit more about including negative test cases, something with specific time zones. And I also used something called few shot prompting. I also gave it some examples of scenarios so it can use as kind of a template for generating the test cases. This can also be a good idea if you want to output a specific wording or way of using test cases, for example. Besides that, also to create more context, also creating stories and test cases, I've also have a description here of the full app or the vision for this app. I'll not go deeply into it here, but it's describing what this solution is about, what are the special needs from the customers. And down here, I also have a list of starter user stories for the initial backlog. So the more context I can give it, often the more concrete output I also get from the AI assistant. But sometimes I have to adjust the context. It could also be too much sometimes. So we have to figure that out in our work here. How much context do I want to give before I ask it to do a specific task? That was one way of working in a team with product owner responsibilities. What I just did in Trello was using Zapier to manipulate Trello cards, you could say. So it's reading the card, and then it fills in more data in the card. And that is made inside Zapier. I'll show you a little example of how you set a flow like that in Zapier. But before I do that, let's try to dive into UX. UX is kind of difficult in my experience. You have to consider your workflow in UX. Sometimes we have user stories, and based on that, we make some UX. And sometimes we have some UX, and then we want some user stories based on that. There's not really a right and wrong in terms of what is the workflow here. But let me start with an example of working with a user story to UX workflow. And in this case, I will use Trello. It reads a card, and it uses ChatGPT to make some examples of some UX we would like to have. And then it uses another model. In this case, it's DALL-E. It's a slightly older model, image model. You can see that. It creates an image that then goes back to Trello. That looks like this. And it takes a little bit of while to generate pictures. And while we wait for that, I can show you how you set this up in Zapier. So in Zapier, you're making some small flows. You have a trigger to start with, and that trigger is, in this case, that a card moved to a list. So that's why I'm dragging things back and forth. And when I've done that, I ask it to find some instructions for what it's going to do, and that is fetching my prompts over here in this board. So I can identify the specific cards. It reads the card, and then it fills it into a conversation with the ChatGPT. Based on that output from ChatGPT, I can do different things. In this case, I'm creating a comment, so I can register what ChatGPT has answered in this flow. And after that, I use the output from one ChatGPT and gives it to another ChatGPT that generates an image. So this is kind of a way of mixture of agents. So sometimes in some workflows, we use different models to do different things. And we have to decide on that. And also sometimes try out what is the best workflow here, what creates the desired output I want. When it has generated an image, then in this case, it adds an attachment to the card and then moves the cards to the next list I have at my Trello board. Sometimes it takes a little bit of while to create a UI sketch, but it has done that. So we can see now that on my card, I now have a picture, and you can see this is not really impressive. At the moment, I can only use an older image model here. So if I wanted to use the newest one, I wasn't able to do that with Zapier and the API in ChatGPT, but hopefully that will improve in the months to come here. But just to show you an idea that you could also get some input as an image in Trello. A small aspect of this is in the comment that I just showed you earlier is the text for generating this picture. That can also be sometimes important to save or have for later, so you can see the prompt that created this picture. So again, making it more transparent on how this AI actually works. This is not perhaps the best way of working with UI. So now we go from UX picture to user stories. This user workflow is created in Figma. So I'll explain in a few seconds what it is, but I will use ChatGPT to analyze this picture and help me with extracting user stories from just the picture. And that looks like this. Here I have ChatGPT. I'm dragging my file here. This is the PDF just with the picture from Figma. There's also other ways of integrating with Figma. I'm just using one way of doing it, which is kind of a very simple, straightforward way of doing it if you want something very quick. What I want to do is also very simple. I just wanted to extract a list of user stories from this file. And that will take a few seconds. And while it's working on that, I will talk about what does this Figma file contain? Well, This is a small flow in the event app. We have an invitation for a coming guest, and I have to answer on this event. So I get a link, I open this page here, I can fill in my name, I can answer if I come to the event or not, and I can also create an account here if I want to, but I can also skip creating an account and just go down here and then see my status on what I answered and see what this event is about. So this is a housewarming. If I wanted to create an account here, I have to fill in some verification code, and then I'm logged in this event app. I just gave it the PDF file, and it can actually read the file, as you can see here, and it can also extract user stories from that. I have one user story with event details, RSVP without an account, provide my name, receive confirmation, option to create an account after that, and verify my email. Sometimes we don't have a lot of things to go with, but often we can get some pretty good, quick stories to continue working with just by analyzing a simple picture here. So here I got 10 stories. If I wanted to use these stories in Trello, of course, I had to shift my tool into Trello, and I could copy paste all these stories into Trello. But there's also other ways of working with that, because these days you can also give custom tools to ChatGPT. And I'll show you an example of that. I've created a small custom tool that can create Trello cards. And I'll also use Zapier in this case to do that. You can also do it with other tools. But if I give ChatGPT a PDF file, I can ask it to create some Trello cards based on that output. This is a CustomGPT. You can see it's called Creating User Stories in Trello. So down here, it asks me if I would like to send these user stories to Trello. And I say, yes, please. And it can now create user stories in Trello because I've set up some integration between ChatGPT. So you can see it's talking to a connector. And hopefully in a few seconds, it will ask me to confirm that I want to create something in Trello. Because you can say that the human in the loop here, when you ask AI to do something, it can be sometimes a good idea to confirm that if we agree that that's a good idea. So I allowed the action here, and it has now created 10 user stories in my board. So let's see where they are. So they should be over here. And you can see that as we are almost talking here, it has now created these 10 stories in a column called user stories. It's a tool shift. So it has taken the output in ChatGPT, and now I can work with the user stories within Trello. So when we begin working with AI in a broader perspective than just our individual working, sometimes we have to work with integrations between these tools. Today, it's becoming more and more easy to do that, but it also requires a little bit of setup, of course. So these are two ways of working with UX. So what I want to back up a little bit and consider was the four aspects we talked about previously, because there are different pros and cons in terms of how we set up this use of AI. So if we consider the tool shift, when we worked in Trello, we can stay in one tool, but it sometimes creates a little bit of creativity constraints, because if I work with ChatGPT and iterate over the chats, normally I can utilize the best AI or also in the best way, but the process is not really shared. It's just me as an individual chatting with ChatGPT, and that can have some effects on the other team members. What about reviews of AI output? Well, in Trello, we saw that it's pretty easy to review and adjust. And of course, I can have an iterative dialogue in ChatGPT, but in ChatGPT, it's not really a team effort, but it's more a team effort in Trello. But it needs AI integration. I have to integrate when I use other tools outside of Trello that is generating my output. And prompt context management. In Trello, we saw that it was easy to collaborate about these prompts because they were in Trello. In ChatGPT, the context is not always shared, so it's more difficult for the whole team to figure out what was this based on? But one good thing about ChatGPT is that it has what I call vivid AI memory. Sometimes you can have memory across different chats, so it can learn how you want to create user stories, for example, how you work with acceptance criteria, and that could be a benefit, but it's not really shared in a broader context than just ChatGPT. And we can also see that it adds a little bit of work to add context to Trello because I have to define it, I have to maintain it, and so forth. Regarding prompt lifecycle, I would say that in Trello, it's easily seen, but we have one problem that is not really in version control. We cannot see the previous versions of the prompt. And if you're working in high-risk areas and you want to conform to the EU Act, you often have to consider how you version control these prompts. So you can go back in time and see what prompts did we use at a specific point in time. And that is not really part of this Trello setup at the moment, at least. And in ChatGPT, well, we have flexible prompts, but there's not a lot of transparency because we're working typically at the individual level in ChatGPT. There's not really the best way of doing it. You have to try some things out and see what works in your context. Sometimes we have to live with some constraints in order to get the team on board and collaborate on this. So remember that.
So Jesper, perhaps just a quick question that has come in is about if you could have used the setup you have made in Zapier, you could have called Figma instead of using pictures you did for the UX.
Yes, so using Figma, they have some tools and they also have integrations to Figma. That is what I'm working currently on. You can read things from Figma and you can also use Figma to make things. So obviously there will be things to experiment with in terms of creating things or reading things from Figma. That's a big topic to dive into now, but perhaps later on in a later session, we can share some experiences about how you can use Figma. It's definitely something I work with a lot these days because Figma can do a lot of good things, but we also have to consider how do we use the output from Figma to create code, for example. Considering three things at the end here, prioritization as a responsibility of a product owner, perhaps we can use that. Communication with stakeholders and teams, yes, that's for sure. Getting user feedback. I have a small hack I would like to share with you because getting user feedback is usually really beneficial for a product owner. But sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get hold of these users because we have to invite them, find them, interview them. And could we use AI to give us at least a first feedback on what we are working with? So let's see if we can get some usable response from an AI assistant like ChatGPT. So now we have our 10 user stories in this context of the chat I just started. Now I will show you a small pattern here for getting user feedback. And it has two steps. First, I'll ask the AI to create a prompt for a potential user of this flow to critically review it from a user perspective. And when I do that, I first get a prompt. And then I use that prompt in the next part here and ask the AI to be a potential user of this flow and review it critically with the questions that it has just generated for me. So, of course, you can also just ask it directly, but it is my experience that when you sometimes put this in two steps, you get a better end result. So the first part here, I'm asking it to create a prompt. It's in the context of this event flow. So this prompt it's creating is very tied to this is an event flow and what is the RSVP experience, what is the optional account creation. So now it's diving into the details here of this flow. And with all of these questions, I will now ask it to take the role of a potential user of this event flow and then critically review it. So you're a potential user of the event flow, review it critically from a user perspective using the questions above. And we'll share this in the chat so you can discuss perhaps afterwards if this is a good review. Is it usable, or is it just kind of faking things up here? But in my experience, it can actually create a first impression from a user with the workflow that you have. So you can see here there's some feedback here, clear event info, that's okay, but it needs stronger visual hierarchy. Feels more like a prototype than a live invite. Confirmation could be more reassuring. Could be a good thing to consider. No clarity about whether email is needed, or I'll get reminders. So let me just copy this here and share it in the chat so you can help me with figuring out if this was a good user feedback or not. So the point here with the two-step here is that you get a really good context for asking the AI to become a user here. If you want to learn more about AI, we have some courses coming up. We like to consider roles. So we have AI-enabled team coach, AI-enabled product owner. We also have a leadership course in Danish. And we also have a new course that is called AI Practitioner that is more broadly about how you can work with AI and also in a responsible way, ensuring that we are in control of the context and prompting if we are in an area where the AI Act might be relevant to consider, because it needs some details when we work with AI more professionally. And if you want to have fun with us building Lego in March, we also have a Lego building exercise where we, of all things, try to learn AI at the same time as we are building Lego. So feel free to join us in a physical event also. We had it once. It was pretty fun, wouldn't you say, Heidi?
Absolutely. And it would be great to see some of you there.
Yeah. So the question, what was that about?
So the question was about the setup when you created all the user stories from ChatGPT. How did you do that?
Yes. If you want to integrate ChatGPT and Zapier, one way of doing it is to create a webhook. And webhook is just kind of an URL that you then give to ChatGPT so it can call Zapier. It then creates a data file that it then sends to Zapier, and Zapier reads this JSON file and loops through the stories that it finds in this data file, and then creates a Trello card for each user story. It's actually not that difficult. You just have to connect the things here so you can get ChatGPT to call Zapier, and then you get Zapier to call Trello. If you also want to see how it is done in ChatGPT, could be that you're interested in that. So this is my custom ChatGPT, and it has some instructions here. So the instructions is about creating user stories. How should it create the user stories so it's easy fed into Trello? I've not got deep into this, but there's some instructions here. And if you want the instructions, please ask AI to create the instructions, because it's pretty good at figuring out what instruction is needed. And then, of course, you can adjust it. And here we have the JSON format also. So this is defining the structure of the data it sends to Zapier. So in this case, it's setting a board name, a list name, stories, and for each stories, it sends title and description. And it also has an example here of the JSON file. When it has these instructions, it calls the webhook in Zapier and fills in the JSON file, and then Zapier takes it and then creates the Trello cards based on that. So that's basically how that works. So perhaps we could say thank you for an interesting session here and your participation also.
Yeah.
And we hope to see you again, perhaps diving more into Figma. That's always an interesting thing to dive into. And have a good evening.
Yeah. Thank you.